Hey, welcome everybody to the 40 Finance channel. My name's Jeff Beers. Today we're going to take a look at Microsoft stock that recently reported earnings. And really we're going to try to project the price of Microsoft stock here in 2021. We have two major milestones involved here in 2021. One, we have the end of their fiscal year. So their fiscal calendar runs from July 1st through June 30th. So we have the end of the fiscal year coming up here in July. So we'll try to project a price for that. And then we're going to look ahead to the end of 2021 to see maybe where Microsoft stock price will be coming into 2022. Reminder, as always, that my stock picks and projections are just my opinion for your entertainment. Please make sure you do your own research before investing. However, if you do like stock analysis like this, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like. Thank you very much for your support. All right, if you missed Microsoft's quarter, they beat on GAAP EPS of 203, which beat by 26 cents. Revenue came in at almost $42 billion, which was a beat of almost $1 million. So everything did pretty well. All the categories, productivity and business was up over the consensus. Intelligent cloud, which of course is arguably their most important segment, that came in up ahead of guidance. And then personal computing, 1303 versus 12.46 billion. And scrolling up and looking at just a couple of the comments, cloud, which of course is so important, $15 billion, up 20% on the year. Azure revenue was up 50%, 46% in constant currency. Personal computing, which I talked about, this includes Xbox, but Xbox doesn't make $13 billion. It's just a bigger part of this Windows. And you also get search advertising and Surface sales as well in here. And finally, looking ahead to Q4, keep in mind that Q4 for Microsoft is different than some companies. It will run from April through June. And they're basically positive, which you don't see a lot of nowadays with companies guiding for the future. Many choose to sit back and say COVID's too uncertain, but Microsoft actually came in and made positive guidance for Q4. So very exciting when the company itself has high expectations. To summarize, segments add up to, between 43.5 and 44.5 billion, which was above basically the $43 billion consensus. All right, so let's get into stock prices. Microsoft today at $252.62. If you look at just a 1 month chart, you can see this one actually dropped. I believe those earnings were on the 28th, and it has dropped since then. The high was 262 over the past 30 days or so. You dropped to 249, and now you sit at 252. And you look at the key metrics, P/E ratio right now stands at 34.36, trailing 12 months EPS of 7.34, and you do get a small dividend with Microsoft, 0.89% on today's price. All right, so lots of good news in the quarterly earnings, lots of promise ahead for the future, and I don't think anybody's arguing that things like Azure are going to have higher demand in the future than they have now. So all that being said, Microsoft still came down from a stock price after relatively positive earnings and positive upside for the next quarter. So what's going on? And to me, the answer is pretty simple, and it is just that Microsoft is trading at a higher valuation now than it typically has in the past. And while that valuation, I would say, is somewhat fair today, it does come with big expectations. So, and you're talking about a company, this is a gigantic company. Okay, you can't just make a small acquisition or a small invention and move the needle when you're making 41 some billion dollars a quarter, right? It takes a lot to institute growth at Microsoft, and they're doing a phenomenal job chugging along. But sometimes in a bull market like this, you have exuberant prices. You have people who are like, nothing can stop Microsoft, it keeps chugging along. But ultimately, at the end of the day, stock prices are tied to a fundamental aspect, and depending on seasonality, market conditions, interest rates, all those things, the stock will trade at a higher or lower valuation, right? So right now we're in the bull market. I think everybody feels pretty good about the future of US stocks. So you have a much higher valuation that Microsoft's being traded on. So when we get into our price targets here, we're going to look into two scenarios, right? The first one would be sort of my theory, which is valuations, or AKA PE ratios, will drop slightly over the next 6 to 12 months. Then we'll add another one that says PE valuations stay the same and people continue to pay up for good stocks, which Microsoft certainly is. All right, so I mentioned in there that Microsoft's PE is trading higher than normal. Usually all that really matters, in my opinion, is that forward PE, when you're kind of taking into account future earnings against today's price. We know that the stock market is always looking ahead. So forward PE for me is more important than trailing PE. And you can see this is a quarterly view. And if you're at 30.3 right now, you're definitely in, the top 2 or 3 valuations that you've seen since back in 2019. And if you switch to an annual chart, the current forward PE is slightly lower than we saw in June last year. But prior to that, you're talking about a company just like Apple, Google, etc., that really was in that 20x range, 24x range. Now, for the purposes of my price target, I'm using a forward PE of 26. I think that's fair. I don't see the market going back to levels with Microsoft of a 15x, but I also think that 30x has proven to be historically high. I'm going to land at 26x, and we'll compare that with 30x, which is where the stock is trading at today. One last thing to call out here, if you're not a fan of PE, that's fine. Everybody has their own metric, but the same holds true for everything that Microsoft's doing, right? PEG ratio, certainly higher in the past couple years than anything we saw pre-COVID. Price to sales, certainly higher than anything we saw pre-COVID. Price to book, enterprise value, I'm not a huge fan of, but that's certainly running a lot higher. So there you go. It doesn't matter if you like PE yourself. It doesn't take long to stare at Microsoft's historical valuations to figure out that it is definitely running higher than it has in the past. All right, so we've got our PE ratio targets, right? My camp says 26x, market's currently trading at 30x, and we need to project our EPS. Now, one thing that analysts have been, I would say, undershooting lately is EPS. So I'm going to be pretty generous on EPS because I think Microsoft has proven without a doubt that they are growing faster than analysts think. So when we look at current year 2021, remember this will end on June 30th and it will be reported sometime in July of 2021. So we're really only 3 or 4 months away from this one. The average estimate is 779. The high estimate, at least right now, is 787. I did some of my own math on the end using basically these surprise percentages for EPS, right? So Microsoft has beaten the last 4 quarters. They beat by 9%, 18, 23, 14. So I think I used an average of about 15% or so. And I'm going to make my EPS projection $8.50, which is honestly about 10% higher than the highest estimate on the board right now. So $8.50. Looking ahead to next year, these numbers, don't forget, would not come in until July of 2022. A lot of stuff will happen between now and then. The high estimate is 913. Given the trajectory of Microsoft today, I'm going to take the liberty of moving this up to $10.50, which sounds a little crazy, but don't forget, we're 14 some months away from this time, and Microsoft has definitely gone up. In fact, if you look at this EPS trend that only goes back 90 days, 90 days ago, analysts were calling for $8.09. Now they're at $8.35. And if we look at the highest analyst today, he's at $9.13. So given the fact that I have to survive 15 months or so with this projection, right, I'm going to say Microsoft continues to go up and does well. I'm saying $10.50 for July of 2022. All right, taking a look at TipRanks to see what the top performing analysts think about Microsoft. Theoretically, in TipRanks, all the analysts are projecting 1 year from the date of their recommendation. So in this case, we just had an earnings call. We have several people who have come in 5 days ago after earnings, and you can see, no one's arguing the buy perspective on Microsoft here. You've got buys across the board. You've got price ranges, I guess, anywhere between 305. Let's try to find our low bar. Maybe 270. There might be another one in there, but let's just say it's 300 if you were to add these all up and divide them out. I'm not going to do that. We'll just say that most of these top performing analysts are going to land somewhere in 300 for this time next year. All right, so let's take a look at how the numbers stack up from my perspective. This is Microsoft. Today is May 3rd. The price around opening was $254. It did slip a little bit in the making of this video, but we'll call it $254. Forward PE of 30.30. That makes the analyst EPS projection for the end of this fiscal year $8.38. Keep in mind, our fiscal year runs July 1 to June 30th. So now on my projections, here's two levels for you. In July of 2021, 3 or 4 months from now, if we had forward PE of 26, which is my bet, or a forward PE of 30, which is essentially today, I'm giving a boost to the EPS estimate. I say Microsoft outperforms for all the reasons we already talked about. That would be $8.50. At that point, you would have a price of $221 or $255, depending on where you think the market will trade their valuations. So I guess one way to look at it today is the $255 is well aligned with today's price, and that insinuates that we are trading at the current valuation, right? If you think valuations will go down in the market as a whole, not just for Microsoft, if you think the multiplier will go down like I do, you might see an opportunity to get Microsoft at 221. All right, let's look ahead to July of 2022. Same scenario. Now this EPS is a long way away, but don't forget, I was pretty loose. I gave them an EPS at $10.50. I'm definitely betting on Microsoft to outperform current projections. If it landed at a forward PE of 26, if you were going to 26x this price, that would be $272. If the market continues to trade at its current valuations at about a 30 PE, 30 forward PE, 30 times 1050, $315. All right, so nobody on the planet is going to tell you that buying Microsoft is stupid or a bad investment. I mean, it's got to be one of the most rock solid tech stocks available today. And if you've been investing in Microsoft for a long time, your cost basis is likely much lower than today's price of $255. The purpose of this exercise is just to go through and see, hey, like, is this a good time to add or start a position? I don't think that there's really a bad time for Microsoft, but if you're a brand new investor and you don't have a ton of money, I would say that you're at fair value right now. If you're looking for a discount, then you may want to wait for a pullback to happen in the market. And frankly, we're probably due for one. And I'm not talking about a crash. I'm talking about a 3 to 5%, maybe if you're lucky, 10% pullback in market prices because of how high valuations are trending. Regardless of what you choose, one thing is for sure at today's price of $255, using both the formulations of a lower PE and a higher forward PE, we came up with upside for Microsoft, which is exactly what you're looking for, not to mention you get a small dividend with this stock. So I would say over the next year, will Microsoft stock be worth more than it is today? Yes. For me, that range would come between about $275 up to a high of about $315. All right, guys, let me know where you think Microsoft will land both in July of 2021 when the fiscal year ends, and then looking ahead to July of 2022 when the next fiscal year ends. Hope you guys enjoyed this content. Give me a like if you did. Really appreciate your support. We'll see you on the next video.